1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock.
In my early teens in the 1950s, I loved American rock and roll. Acts like Bill Haley, Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Elvis Presley. And their music dominated the music scene in Britain.
Around the clock tonight, we're gonna rock, rock, rock.
But then, in the early 1960s, there was an explosion of British music which was to conquer the world. Top TV pop shows of the day now featured all the new groups that were appearing. They were all boys, occasionally a girl drummer or a girl bass player. Girl groups were usually acts from America like Martha and the Vandellas and the Supremes.
You know I love you.
The most successful British female acts were singers like Sandy Shaw, Lulu, Cilla and Dusty Springfield. But despite all the fabulous happenings in the 60s, there was still no successful British all-girl group who sang and played instruments. And then in 1963, a man called Wally Bishop had a bright idea. This is Wally Bishop, known professionally as Waldini, born in Cardiff in 1894. During the 1920s, 30s and 40s, he led a gypsy band. They played all over the UK, but they also travelled to Europe, Africa, even India, where this photograph was taken. During World War II, they travelled abroad to entertain the troops, like here in Burma, where very few acts and entertainers went, except of course famously Vera Lynn. During the 50s and 60s, Waldini presented summer shows in Ilfracombe and Llandudno. At the end of the season in Ilfracombe in 1963, he decided he wanted to form an all-girl band, like the Beatles, with some of the young girl dancers he had in the show. They needed another girl to complete the lineup, and that's where I came in. So, along with Linda, Marie and Maggie, we formed a band. We even had schoolgirl uniforms, long before Britney Spears. So we called ourselves the Fabs, and this is our story. Wally was very well known in Cardiff at that time, and he was able to get us a lot of write-ups in the local press. Being something a little bit different, we got plenty of work in the local social clubs and rugby clubs up and down the valleys and around Cardiff. We even worked some of the bigger venues in South Wales. Then, in May 1964, it was time to head off to the bright lights of Ilfracombe in Devon to appear in Waldini's summer show. We sang and danced in routines throughout the show, and then the highlight of the night, our own spot, as the Fabulous Fabs. We lived in rooms in Ilfracombe, which was a new experience for me as I'd never lived away from home before. We didn't do much cooking for ourselves. We basically ate out at little cafes around the town. There were no exotic takeaways in 1964, but of course there was always good old fish and chips. Sometimes our parents would come to visit for the day. They'd come over on a Campbell's paddle steamer. We'd all spend a happy day on the beach, one of our favourite places to be.
Do you want fun? Oh, Johnny, oh, Johnny.
3 afternoons a week, weather permitting, we performed on the bandstand just outside the theatre.
You make my side heart jump.
Wally conducted his little orchestra and we sang songs from the shows.
Sit still a minute, I'm oh, Johnny, please tell me, dear, what makes me love you so? You're not handsome, it's true, but when I look at you, I go, oh, Johnny, oh.
The moment I wake up, before I put on my makeup, I say a little prayer for you. And while combing my hair now, and wondering what dress to wear now.
At the beginning of 1965, we were offered a contract to play for GIs on American bases in Germany. Quite a leap from Ilfracombe. We had no transport of our own, so my father and a friend of his hired a van and took us and all our equipment down to Dover to catch the Ostend ferry.
Hey life, look at me, I can see the real.
It was amazing to stand on the deck and see all our equipment being loaded onto the ship.
Suddenly I just woke up to the happening.
I actually stayed on deck quite a lot, not being a very good sailor. Then we had to get all the equipment on the train from Ostend to Munich. We just put it all inside the carriage with us, on the seats, on the floor, even on the luggage rack overhead. After a long and tiring journey, we arrived safely in Bavaria. We soon settled into our pretty basic hotel accommodation, but then we got ourselves all ready to be picked up and taken to our first gig. When you went through the gates of the base, it was like being in Little America. They used dollars, they had their big American cars, and the food, totally different to anything we'd tasted before. T-bone steaks, pizzas, cheeseburgers, and a BLT, a bacon, lettuce and tomato toasted sandwich. Pretty good, mind. We weren't allowed to use most of the facilities on the base, but they did let us use the laundrette, which was quite handy really with all our pants. We absolutely loved playing 10-pin bowling, which was yet to reach the backwaters of Wales. Although we were now playing quite decent guitars and we had a few good amplifiers, the microphones looked like they belonged to the BBC during World War II.
This one reads, "We gotta get out of this place, C Battery." Well, as you probably know, we don't know this number. But anyway, we'll do a song. No, we don't know I'm a loser either.
The guys really loved it when we played songs that mentioned their hometowns or cities, like this one, Memphis, Tennessee. That, along with Kansas City, we probably could have played 2 or 3 times a night.
We're located right now at the Auction Hotel in the city of Würzburg, where we are speaking with 4 young ladies from South Wales, England. The music you have just heard was that of these 4 attractive girls who make up a rock and roll combo called the Fabs. Their group is currently touring throughout Western Germany and the Marne Division NCO and EM clubs. Seated directly across from me is the leader of the group, Miss Sarah Johnston. Sarah, how did this unusual band get its beginning?
Well, it was about 18 months ago that there were 3 girls in Cardiff, in South Wales, back home in Great Britain, Maggie Lee, Maria Kay, and Lynn Barry, who at the time were dancing for a living, and they decided they'd try and make themselves into an all-girl group, or band, as you call it. So they started off, but 3 really wasn't enough, so they decided they'd like to bring in another one. So they heard that I used to play guitar a little bit, so I joined in too, and then we got going.
Well, you have a fairly good gimmick here. Besides being a dance band, also singers. Is an all-girl band fairly common in England, Maggie?
No, we're the first one, really. I think so, in England. There's one in America, but it's, not heard of very much.
Did any of you in the band have any experience on these instruments before you started, Marie?
No, Lynn, Maggie and I didn't have much experience at all. We didn't play at all before we started, but Sarah had a few years. She played a few years on and off on the guitar. And we just started from scratch when we started the group, with our instruments. They were brand new to us.
Well, how did everyone get started on these various instruments, especially you, Lynn, being a girl drummer?
Well, our manager said that he was going to get us instruments to make up this band, and one day he came up and he said, "Oh, Lynn, here's your drums," and he said, "Marie, here's your guitar," and Maggie was playing a tambourine, and then when we used to go to classes to learn the instruments, Mr. Bishop bought her a bass guitar, and the 3 of us went for about 6 weeks to this school learning the instruments, and then Sarah came into the group, and then we started with the group, and then ever since Sarah's been teaching us.
Well, I understand recently there was a difficulty with one of the players.
Oh yes, that was me. I was making a cup of tea, good old England, and the hot water went over my legs, and I was rushed to hospital with badly burnt legs. And Maria said, "Oh well, they all said, oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? How can we get on the stage, without the drummer?" So Maria said, she said, "Oh, I'll have a go." She said, "Mind you, it's my first time, but I'll have a go." And what I've heard, she's been very good. Maria, do you want to go?
I was very scared, when I started off on the drums as to what the boys would say, but they were very good. They gave me a good round of applause and all, so I was quite surprised, I was very pleased.
Well, where have you traveled so far throughout Germany?
Well, we came to Germany first in April, and we went to Munich and up to Bad Kreuznach and back, and then went to Wiesbaden for a month. Then we came to Hanau, and then down to the Würzburg area. Then we're going to Kassel next month.
Well, how did you pick the names, the Fabs?
Well, we didn't really pick it. It was more or less thrust upon us because at the time we were being interviewed for the press at home by a girl reporter, and she suddenly said, "Well, what is your name?" And we didn't know what to say. We didn't have a proper name. But we always used to say all the time, everything was Fab, Fab, anything was Fab. And so Mr. Bishop would be listening to the interview, said, "Oh, well, I know, why don't you call yourselves the Fab?" So that was it. It's just stuck.
This says, from the best MPs in Europe, 18th USA SAFS. How about if you just whistle? also do another number. It's called Walking the Dog.
After 4 months, we returned to the UK from Germany. This time we put all our equipment in the luggage compartment at the back of the train. Crossing the border from Germany into Belgium, customs officers took all the equipment off the train because apparently it wasn't properly documented. We were totally unaware of this and carried on via Ostend to Dover, where we waited patiently for the equipment to be unloaded off the ship. It wasn't on there. What a shock. We carried on back to Cardiff and spent 3 weeks trying to find out what had happened. Eventually we paid the customs duties and we got the gear back. TWW, our local independent television station. We had a few shows on there and also BBC Wales.
To be loved by anyone. It's not unusual to have fun with anyone. But when I see you hanging about with anyone, it's not unusual to see me cry.
At another gig at the Cardiff Top Rank, we supported Chuck Berry. The Easy Beats opened the show and then we came on. But by then, all the fans, all they wanted was Chuck. They listened politely to us, but it was obvious they were thinking, come on, get off, we want Chuck. Oh well, we just put it down to experience. While driving through Brussels, in the distance we could see this amazing looking structure. It was called the Atomium. You could go up inside it and it was absolutely fantastic. We'd never seen anything like this before. It was left over from the World Fair in 1958.
Good night now. I want everyone to join in and clap their hands along with us. It's called A Whole Lot of Shaking.
During the guitar solo in this number, we turned around and shook our bottoms at the audience. Not very provocative by today's standards, but then we certainly got a reaction. On one occasion, Marie was suffering with an ear infection and was in severe pain. She took some painkillers that one of the medics on the base gave her. The result was quite alarming.
But the crowd called out for more.
I think some of the guys were a bit suspicious as to what she'd taken.
Harder as the ceiling flew away.
Fortunately, she was soon feeling much better and made a full recovery.
And the waiter brought a tray.
Spending so much time on the road, we realised we needed a bigger vehicle to travel in. So we bought an ambulance. Perfect. Plenty of room for all the equipment and space for us to have a little kip as well if we needed one. We had now been booked to play at a US base near Seville in Spain. To get there we had to drive over the Pyrenees. So off we went. What could go wrong? It was a tough climb for Dennis to get over the Pyrenees, and by the time he reached Seville, we realised we'd blown a gasket. Fortunately, Dennis had a Perkins diesel engine, which was easily fixed once we got to Spain. some of the bigger bases, we were booked as a floor show. We only had to work for an hour. It was great. We played all our best numbers, even throwing in a few saucy jokes. We added a few dance routines which made us more of a cabaret act. We had a nice selection of costumes by now, including these see-through dresses with silver paper bikinis. Woohoo! Linda's drum solo always brought the house down. Bread and butter. This was a very popular number. I'm not sure if the guys just liked the song or whether it was the fact that Linda bounced up and down on her stool between the chorus and the verse. We now went back to playing for 4 hours a night, this time at the International Grill in Garmisch. It's situated in the beautiful Bavarian Alps, and a lot of the military personnel came down there for some R&R. We played on top of the bar in the middle of the room. It was one of our favourite gigs. We got to know the Water Patrol. These were the guys who organised all the recreational activities for the GIs.
When it's cold outside, I've got the month of May.
They came to the club most nights and we went to the lake most days. They taught us how to water ski and sail, things we probably never would have done if we'd still been in South Wales.
Talking about my girl. I've got so much honey, the bees envy me. I've got a sweeter song than the birds in the trees. Well, I guess you say what can make me feel this way.
Once again we found ourselves back in Spain, but this time way down south on the Atlantic coast at a place called Rota, where there was a US nuclear submarine base. We got to know some of the submariners and they invited us to go on board one of the subs. We didn't think very carefully about what to wear on the submarine and turned up in our miniskirts. This caused a great deal of hilarity on board as we tried to negotiate climbing up and down the ladders. On this trip to Spain, we took a little Ford Popular with us, so we didn't always have to travel in the ambulance. We took it all around Spain, including Mallorca, and then back to the UK without any trouble at all. We hit the headlines again when we had dresses stolen out of the back of the ambulance while we were playing in a large nightclub in Palma, Mallorca.
Here comes Santa Claus, here comes.
Our last gig in Spain was at the Torrejón Air Base in Madrid, where we appeared in the club magazine advertising all their Christmas celebrations. We weren't going to be there though, we were heading for home.
Hang your stockings and say your prayers.
We spent Christmas at home with our families, and then we headed back to Garmisch in Germany to the International Grill once again, where we opened on New Year's Eve. We then played for the rest of the month of January. Garmisch looked so different in the winter. It was really pretty with all the snow. We made friends with the ski patrol and they taught us how to ski. Once again, Garmisch was a magical place. We worked for a few more months in Germany and then we were booked to appear at an airbase in the Azores. What a trip that was! It took 3 flights to get there, and on the last aircraft we had to spread out all our equipment on the seats to balance the plane. We received a really warm welcome from the people stationed in the Azores. Although they had a small band resident in the club, we were the first act to be booked there. On our last night, they baked us a cake in the shape of a guitar to show their appreciation. The islands of the Azores have now become a popular destination for holidaymakers, but when we were there were no tourists at all.
You better come home, Speedy Gonzales.
We had now been offered a 12-month contract in a big nightclub in Mexico City. At first, we were reluctant to take this offer seriously. Then we realized that Mexico City was to host the Olympic Games in 1968. We decided that this could be a great adventure, so with return tickets, just in case, we took the bull by the horns and headed off to Mexico. Hasta la vista, baby!
Won't you come home?
To get to Mexico City, we flew from Cardiff to Brussels, where we picked up a Canadian Pacific flight that went to Montreal and then headed on down to Mexico. We found it a bit strange at first. living and working at high altitude, but we soon acclimatized and then we had the most fantastic time.
Donde crece la palma, yo soy un hombre sencillo.
We worked in a large nightclub called El Señorial. It had 3 rooms, one for dining and dancing, there was a jazz bar, and then there was the room we worked in, called the Perla Negra.
In the streets, they'll be dancing in Chicago.
We had new publicity photographs taken, and these were displayed in the foyer of the club.
Dancing in the streets. All we need is music. Sweet, sweet music. Sweet music. Tell me music.
We made an LP, and that was sold in the club, but it was also sold in the record section of good old Woolworths in downtown Mexico City. This is Mario. He was the other act on with us in our bar. He was a Mexican comedian who sang and played the accordion and was very, very popular in Mexico City.
They'll be laughing, singing, music swinging, dancing in the streets, Philadelphia, PA, dancing in the streets, yeah, Baltimore and DC now, dancing in the streets, and don't forget the New City, dancing in the streets. All we need is music, sweet, sweet music, sweet music. There'll be music everywhere. All we'll sing and swaying, records playing, dancing in the streets. Oh, it doesn't matter what you wear, just as long as you are there. Come on, every guy, every girl, everywhere around the world, they're dancing in the streets, they're dancing in the streets, dancing.
This is Antonio, the maitre d', and these girls are Mexican and they worked in the jazz bar.
Buttercup, baby, just to let me down and mess me around, and then worst of all,
These are the 2 bands that played for dancing. One was an Irish show band and the others came from Sweden.
anyone, darling, you know that I am from the start. So build me up, buttercup, don't break my heart. I'll be over at 10, you told
Everyone played for 45 minutes and then had a 45-minute break. We all went upstairs and had something to eat and played dominoes. Not quite sex, drugs and rock and roll.
baby, try to find a little time and I'll make you happy. I'll be home, I'll be beside the phone waiting for you. What do you
Accommodation was part of our contract and we were provided with a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment in the Zona Rosa, a very fashionable area of Mexico City.
But I love you still, I need you.
The large fluffy toy animals you see all around the flat were sold at the club and they were bought by admiring members of the public and given to us on stage. Not a common practice back in the clubs of the UK.
I'm a toy, but I could be the boy you adore if you just let me know. Although you are true, I'm attracted to you.
One night at about 2 o'clock in the morning, an unknown admirer of Linda's came round to serenade her with his mariachi band. It didn't go down very well, and she never saw him again. We enjoyed seeing some of the sights of Mexico, like the pyramids of Teotihuacan, the local markets, and of course the floating gardens of Xochimilco.
Los corazones.
The city was really buzzing now, with thousands of visitors from all over the world who'd come to attend the Olympic Games. One day we bumped into some British Olympic walkers, and they said they could get us into the Olympic Village. We'd have to pretend to be athletes. So we met up with them and they gave us all tracksuit tops and we sauntered in and nobody even questioned us. It was absolutely fantastic to wander around and see these world-class athletes training. But we got caught out. A local reporter took our photo and put it on the front of the local newspaper. That night people came in the club waving a copy of the newspaper and shouting, "Hey, this is you!"
Raindrops are falling on my head.
Security at the Mexico Olympics in 1968 was very lax. However, things were to change very dramatically after the tragic events at the Munich Olympics 4 years later.
On my head they keep falling, so I just did me some talking to the sun. And I said I didn't like the way he got things done, sleeping on the job. Those raindrops are falling on my head, they keep falling, but there's one thing.
Thanks to the walkers, we were able to get tickets to go to the events on 2 days. It was absolutely brilliant to sit there and watch everything going on. We couldn't really believe it.
Long till happiness steps up to greet me. Raindrops keep falling on my head, but that doesn't mean my eyes will soon be turning red. Crying's not for me, 'cause
These are the walkers setting off, but the Brits didn't have much success, I'm afraid, as the high altitude was just too much for them.
nothing's worrying me. It won't be long till happiness steps up to greet me. Raindrops keep falling on my head, but that doesn't mean my eyes will soon be turning red. Crying's not for me, 'cause I'm never gonna stop the rain by complaining, because I'm free. Nothing's worrying me.
After we'd been in Mexico for a few months, we started throwing parties on a Sunday night, our night off. All kinds of people turned up, other musicians, friends we'd made in the club, and even the Olympic athletes after they'd finished their events. Our parties became quite notorious. There was always something to celebrate, birthdays, etc. We even celebrated St. David's Day. This is us up on the roof of our apartment building, catching a few rays. You can see Mexico City in the background. As usual, there's music playing. We came home for Christmas, but as our local newspaper reported, we were due to go back to Mexico for another 6 months. Acapulco is about 4.5 hours drive from Mexico City. We'd hire a car, and on Sunday morning we'd get up and leave by 6 and be on the beach by 11.
If you stay too long, yes, you'll be going loco down in Acapulco. The magic down there is so strong. Feel the pressure, your back's up against the wall. Love is getting on you.
This was just a quiet little beach just around the corner from where the world-famous cliff divers dived over 100 feet down into the water. It was very expensive round there, but we were quite happy on this beach just swimming around in the Pacific Ocean. There was a Mexican chap who frequented the club. He worked for Cunard and he fell madly in love with Maggie. He wanted to take her to Acapulco for the weekend, but as she didn't really fancy him, she told him that she couldn't go by herself. We would all have to go as her chaperones. And so he paid for all of us to stay at Las Brisas, one of the most glamorous places to stay in Acapulco. Every bungalow had its own private little swimming pool and maids to cater for all our needs. We thought it was an absolute dream and we felt like we were really living the high life. On another occasion, the guy who worked for Cunard wanted to take Maggie away again, this time to Tampico, a holiday resort about 300 miles north of Mexico City. But once again, she explained, we'd all have to go.
Disappointment haunted all my dreams. Then I saw her face. Now I'm a believer. Not a trace of doubt in my mind. I'm in love. I'm a believer. I couldn't leave her if I tried. I thought love was more or less a given thing. It seems the more I gave, the less I got.
There were quite a lot of wealthy people who came to the club. They often invited us to their homes, which was quite an eye-opener. This beautiful house was situated just outside Mexico City and belonged to a very wealthy French family. While they were back in Paris, their daughter, who was studying in Mexico City, invited us all to stay for the day. How the other half lives! I'm not sure who this chap was, but we ended up at his house one afternoon where he had horses, motorbikes, cars, and a lion on a lead, as you do. We also discovered go-karting, which we'd never seen before, but I absolutely loved it. And so we came to the end of our year in Mexico City, and it was time to say goodbye to all our friends. We had met some amazing people during that 12 months, including Steve McQueen, who was filming in Mexico and popped into the club. Some American businessmen who came down to the club every month arranged for us to play in San Francisco before we headed back to the UK. We explained that we couldn't get work permits to play in the States, so to get around that, they arranged to fly us up to San Francisco, paid for our hotel accommodation, hired all the equipment that we needed, and we played at a charity gig.
To San Francisco, you're gonna meet some gentle people there. For those who come to San Francisco.
We had a great night with the show, and then for the next few days, the guys took us around and showed us some of the sights of San Francisco.
In the streets of San Francisco, gentle people with flowers in their hair. All across the nation, such a strange vibration, people in motion.
Maggie's gentleman friend who worked for Cunard arranged for her and myself to sail home on the QE2 from New York to Southampton. Linda and Marie decided to fly straight home for family commitments.
I am sailing stormy waters.
So in June 1969, Maggie and I found ourselves crossing the North Atlantic on this amazing ship. There were a lot of wealthy people on board, but Maggie and I just took it in our stride. So here we are back in the UK, and there were still no successful all-girl groups. We applied for an audition on Opportunity Knocks, the biggest talent show on TV at the time. Linda got in touch with a relative, Sid Green, who along with Dick Hills were a very successful comedy writing team. They also had an agency and they took us on, but they didn't like the name The Fabs and changed it to The Johnson Sisters. We now started to get more work in bigger venues, like the Golden Garter in Manchester, Batley Variety Club with Baldoonican, and Pete Stringfellow's club, Cinderella Rockefellers in Leeds. At Christmas, we did a show with the Barron Knights and Frank Carson in Chatham. We also did a week at the Club Double Diamond in Caerphilly, which was just around the corner for us. We were then offered a tour of the American bases in Turkey, Greece and Italy. So we bought a new van and decided to take our boyfriends with us. Well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. Crossing the border into Turkey, the customs officials made us take all our equipment and the luggage out of the van so they could check exactly what we were taking into the country. Our days on the road were hot and dusty. We travelled hundreds of miles sometimes to get from one base to another. Sometimes though, when we were near the coast, we'd stop and have a little paddle to cool down. As we drove further across Turkey, at one time only being a few hundred miles from the Iran and the Iraq borders, whenever we stopped we drew a lot of attention from the locals, who'd probably never seen girls in miniskirts before. We were booked to play for a week at a large naval base near Adana on the Mediterranean coast. There were a couple of guys on the base who had a speedboat and they offered to take us out water skiing. As it was the height of summer and very, very hot, it was just great to get out on the water. We spent all day water skiing and swimming. It actually felt like we were really on holiday. After 3.5 weeks in Turkey, we headed to Greece, to Athens, where we only worked for a couple of nights, but we did manage to see the Acropolis. The last 10 days of the tour were spent in Italy, where we played at a large NATO base in Naples. From there we visited Capri and Pompeii.
Nel blu dipinto di blu, e chi dici di stare lassù? E volavo, Venice, punalte del sole con coro più su. Mentre molto pian piano sparivo lontane laggiù. Una musica dolce suonare soltanto per me. Volare, oh, e cantare, oh.
We had an afternoon out and went to Pompeii, but I must admit at that time we didn't really appreciate it. Many years later I revisited and realised the significance of this wonderful site.
Venite di stare lassù nel blu dipinto.
Now it was time to start thinking about heading home. We went via Rome, where we saw some of the world-famous sights. So, after 6 weeks and 6,500 miles, we packed the van for the last time and headed for home.
I need you and your love.
Imagine me and you, I do.
Our next overseas booking was at the Jacaranda Club in Las Palmas, where we were to open on January the 1st, 1971.
If I should call you up, invest a dime, and you say you belong to me, lose my mind.
We caught a ferry from Portsmouth to Bilbao via the Bay of Biscay, which took 36 hours. Then we drove down to Madrid, parked the van and caught a flight from Madrid to Las Palmas. It had been absolutely freezing in Madrid on New Year's Eve, and it felt very strange to arrive in Las Palmas on January the 1st, where the temperature was about 75 degrees.
And you for me, so happy together. I can't see me.
At that time, Linda had just got married, and her husband came with us. Marie and Maggie's fiancés also came over to stay. It was a bit cramped in our apartment, I have to say. In 1971, the Canary Islands were becoming a popular destination for holidaymakers. We met lots of Germans and other Europeans, but not many Brits. I think most of them were still heading to Spain for their summer sun.
The dice, it had to be.
Playing for a month in Las Palmas in January was an absolute dream job for us. We spent a lot of time on the beach and enjoyed the sun, especially when we realised how cold it must have been at home.
And how is the weather? So happy together.
For this gig in Zaragoza, we had a new roadie, and that's when I met my husband. One afternoon, the guys took us out to show us some of the aircraft on the airbase. It was quite a laugh, really, and they kept saying things like, "Oh, be careful, don't touch that button." The next 6 or 7 months was probably the highlight of our career. We did 3 shows on Opportunity Knocks, and with average viewing figures of 22 million a show, we finally felt that perhaps we were beginning to get somewhere. We were offered a record contract, and we did a spot on the Frankie Howard Show.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, here are the Johnson sisters.
Yesterday was filled with rain. Sunny, smile at me and smile at me and ease the pain. All the dark days are gone and the bright days are here. My sunny one shines so sincere. Sunny one so true, I love you.
We spent a week at Rockfield Studios, where we cut 6 demos with a record producer called Tony Hall. He used to be a DJ on Radio Luxembourg back in the day, but now he was recording and producing acts like Black Sabbath, and he was convinced we could make it.
Friends, one of the top winning acts of 1971 were 4 delectable dollies known as the Johnson Sisters. Now, since being with us on June the 7th, they've had tons of engagements, both at home and abroad. Are they Variety Club trophy winners of 1971? Lend your eyes and ears and find out as the Johnson Sisters from Wales perform again.
We're really lucky to have a copy of this recording of our appearance on Opportunity Knocks, because over the years there were hundreds of bands and acts who appeared on the show, but the tapes were all white and they have nothing to show for it. It was really nerve-wracking to play on Opportunity Knocks. We had to sing live, we had to play live, we had no extra instruments helping us, we had no automatic tuning devices, and if we went wrong, well, we just had to carry on.
When you feel your world is closing in, and the before it begins, and when you feel it trembling at your feet, and you're holding everybody that you meet, you know you better make a change for something better, something better, something better, something better for you. You know you better make a change for something better, something better, something better, something better.
This was the song that Tony Hall decided he wanted to release as a single. He'd taken it back up to London to do a bit of remixing, he added a few special effects, and the final result was absolutely brilliant.
for Welsh Dolly Birds. Thank you for the Johnson sisters who are appearing in Dick Whittington at the New Theatre Cardiff.
So here we are again, back at the New Theatre Cardiff in pantomime with Ted Rogers. It's been nearly 8 years since we were here with Tommy Cooper. Although we had our own spot as the Johnson sisters, we were expected to appear in a lot of the scenes, singing along with the rest of the company. We also had to provide some of the backing vocals as well. During the miners' strike in early 1972, all the power would go off in the theatre. But with a couple of car batteries hooked up outside, they managed to keep the show going. So here we are, rocking out in the music room on Dick Whittington's ship.
Where's your mama gone? Where's your mama gone? Far, far away. Where's your papa gone? Where's your papa gone? Little baby Don. Little baby Don. Where's your papa gone?
And so, inevitably, with marriages looming, it was time to call it a day.
The show is over now.
We stayed lifelong friends and enjoyed many hours talking and laughing about the adventures we'd had.
My friend, there isn't any more. The stage is empty now. The lights are fading, and as the curtain falls, my heart calls. Tell me why the show